Back Chair, recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter, 5 minutes for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here, and thank you for your efforts in implementing 21st Century Cures, legislation that I personally feel like is some of the best legislation we've passed in Congress in quite a while. So we're very proud of it, particularly coming out of this committee. Dr. Collins, I'll start with you. I wanted to ask you about, particularly about one of the initiatives of 21st Century Cures, and that was to really review the regulations and policies with respect to research in laboratory animals. And as I understand it, you're working with USDA now and the FDA to try to complete a review of that. And I just wanted to ask you if you could tell us the current status of that review, and when do you anticipate the completion of that review?
I appreciate the question. We are very seriously engaged in this, and again, 21st Century Cures gave us some clear guidance about what we ought to engage in. And we did put out an RFI back in March to ask for comments in this area in terms of whether the oversight that we currently apply to animal experimentation is sufficient or whether it has areas that are overly bureaucratic, which has been a concern. Obviously, we are deeply concerned about maintaining our ethical responsibilities in terms of how we take care of animals that are subjected to various experimental approaches, from which we learn a great deal that has led to many medical advances. We got 19,000 responses to that request, and they're currently being sorted at the moment. We would expect, therefore, to have, based upon those, a draft set of recommendations about animal care and use sometime probably in September. We will then need to have responses to that, and so we would hope to have a final version of this by December or early in 2019.
Great, great. Any opportunities that you've identified thus far that may help you?
I think there are concerns that some of the requirements we put on grant applicants in terms of animal care and use could be delayed until the award is actually made, as opposed to asking them to have all of those things in place when they submit an application, because that can add a lot of time and effort. And obviously our concern is, if we're going to actually make the award, we want to be sure that the animal care is being done in the best possible way. That is one area. Obviously, there are differences of opinion here.
Yes.
And we're seeing those in those 19,000 responses. And at some point, we have to try to come down in what we think is a fair and balanced approach.
And I'm sure you'll reach that, and I'm very confident. Let me switch gears here and talk about something that's very exciting to me as a pharmacist, and that's precision medicine. And that's something that I see, genomic testing and everything is something I see as the wave of the future and great opportunities for us in healthcare. But I'm concerned when we get all this data in, we're struggling already with our electronic health records. You know, how are we going to handle this? I want to ask you that, and then I'd like to ask Dr. Gottlieb as well.
Well, I'll say a word, and then I'll ask Dr. Devaney to say a little more. As the Deputy Director of the All of Us program, we are very invested in looking at this in the fashion that is cutting edge as far as dealing with very large data sets, putting the data into the cloud. We just had a very interesting all-day workshop on Monday on artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that can be applied to these unprecedented data sets to glean the maximum amount of information out of there, while at the same time maintaining the confidentiality, the security systems that the participants in this are going to expect about their de-identified data. But maybe, Dr. Devaney, you might say a little bit more.
Sure, please.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. So, one of the data types that's going to be, I think, the most essential to precision medicine, or one of, is information from electronic health records. And this is one of the largest challenges for our program. We have direct partnerships with many healthcare organizations, and we're getting those data continuously from those partnerships. But we're also working on other strategies, including one in partnership with 4 of the largest EHR vendors right now to work on making the data transmission much more seamless across provider lines and into the program when a participant authorizes it.
Great. Dr. Gottlieb, I know this is important in drug data development as well.
I appreciate the question. I would just take it a step up the continuum to try to make effective use of the data, because there's so much information. How can we make effective use of the data in a way that it can translate to clinical benefits to patients? And I think this is where some of the issues we talked about earlier around clinical trial innovation comes in, where you have the ability now, with a seamless clinical trial design, to effectively bias enrollment in the trial for some of the genomic information and predictive information that's likely to predict who's more likely to benefit from a treatment and who's less likely to experience a side effect. And so if we can use this information in that way to structure trials and enrollment, we can end up with much more information about who's likely to benefit from a drug and more tools to make sure the right drug gets to the right patient at the right time. We've talked about this for decades, we now have that technology at hand.
And, you know, I can sense the excitement in your voice, and it's exciting for me as a healthcare professional as well. I just look into the future of this and just think, wow, what we've got to look forward to. Thank you, and I yield.
Chair, thank the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. The chair needs to state that without objection, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. The chair asks if the gentleman from Texas has a unanimous consent request.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Concerning Alzheimer's, were you going to ask that additional information be forwarded to the committee about Alzheimer's?
Oh, if you could, just send it to the committee on some of the information you couldn't have given us today because of the time limits.
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
And two,
I forgot what I was going to ask.